After you have those written on your cards, kind of look at your group, and as your group finishes up, then you're going to take turns, just round robin style, kind of sharing out what that feeling is you want to leave with and how you're going to focus and get there. This is a good activity to use with staff if you're just trying to help to get a focus set for the day. It's kind of like the we're all in activity to get all of our minds moving forward in the same direction. Now that we had a chance to kind of get all back into things again, we're going to go through our purpose and our agenda for the day. Just like this is a similar purpose to what we've done with all of our balanced literacy pieces, the session is going to focus on a component of balanced literacy. Word study is going to be our component today, focusing on phonological awareness and phonics. We're going to spend time during these sessions diving into readers and writers workshops, small group instruction, read alouds, word building, and vocabulary instruction. So things that you haven't done yet will be done in our next session. And the essential practices in literacy will be woven into each session as they are the research foundations for the skills and practices that we are using in balanced literacy. And then our outcomes to gain an understanding of what balanced literacy is, to be able to consider and explore our beliefs, some of the time constraints or scheduling things that we have to think about, and start us to think about the daily practices that we want to incorporate into our classroom, as well as starting to apply some of those pieces into context and bring those back into our classroom when we're not here meeting as a group, as well as to kind of reflect and refine on what our practice is and make tweaks as we need to and learn more. So our agenda today is we're going to start with Essential 4. We're going to be focusing on phonological awareness piece, and then we're going to go into letter-sound relationships. The information and research that we are bringing to you is the research that we have had from our training from Nell Duke and Tanya Wright, and so this is where you're going to see a lot of slides coming in from U of M and Michigan State and those places, because we want to make sure that what we're bringing back to you is exactly what the researchers are telling us. And so our learning intention today is to gain new knowledge and skills around phonological awareness and phonics. And hopefully you'll be able to show that at the end by kind of taking and reflecting on your current practice and thinking about what are some areas that you want to look at for growth. And just a reminder, if you don't have access to Google, all of the items are in Google, so make sure that you let one of us know if you need access to these materials.
Switch. Okay, so in our previous sessions in balanced literacy, we talked a lot about readers and writers workshop. And today we're going to be doing a lot on phonics and phonological awareness, which most of those activities are going to take place outside of the readers and writers workshop time. The only exception to that would be when a teacher's conferring with a student and they need to address an issue within phonological awareness or phonics. That can take place during the readers or writers workshop. But otherwise, this instruction should be taking place outside of that. So we want to start by kind of thinking about a common confusion. What is the difference between phonological awareness versus phonemic awareness versus phonics? So I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to just in your own head think about, do I have a clear understanding of what the difference is between each of those things? Okay, so we're going to come back to this question after we go through the next few slides and hopefully provide some clarity for you and give you a chance to kind of talk about it. So phonological awareness is the ability to think about, talk about, and manipulate the sound structure of language. It has to do with the sounds only. Phonological awareness includes all of the blocks of sound. So it can be the individual phonemes that we have in words, right? Each individual sound in a word. But it can also be words and sentences. It can be syllables in words. It can be onset and rhyme. So it can be any one of those kind of chunks of sounds that make up our language. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's phonological awareness. Phonemic awareness falls under the phonological awareness umbrella. And it's really the hardest skill within that phonological awareness umbrella. So phonemic awareness is the ability to identify and manipulate the individual sounds or phonemes within words. So there are no visual letters when we're talking about phonemic awareness. You can do all your, and should do all your phonemic awareness instruction without letters and words in front of the students. It's necessary for learning to read. It's the foundation that kids need to then be able to move into phonics. And it's the highest and most difficult level of phonological awareness. And this little drawing right here is kind of an easy way to remember what phonemic awareness is. You can do it in the dark. You don't have to see anything to do phonemic awareness activities. Okay? So the alphabetic principle is the understanding, and this word understanding is highlighted because when we talk about the alphabetic principle, it's just the understanding that there are systematic and predictable relationships between written letters and spoken sounds. So that when you understand that the letter A can say A, it can say A, it can say right? That's an alphabetic principle understanding. Phonics is the actual system then of associating the letters and the sounds. Okay, so the alphabetic principle is just the principle itself, the understanding of that principle, whereas phonics is the system that actually puts the letters and sounds together. So when we get to phonics, now we have to open our eyes. We can't do it in the dark anymore, right? We have to see the letters and be able to associate those sounds with the letters. Sorry. Okay, so having that real quick run through of those three terms, take a minute again to think about that question. What's the difference between phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, and phonics? And talk to your table partners about your clarity of thinking around those three terms. She should know better. All my calls are blocked because it's all on Do Not Disturb, but it comes through when it's on because they're in my face. I'm like hitting the silencer. Silence is vibrating.
I love it because my faces don't come up when people come, so I love it when people's faces come up because then you see it.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to give them a minute, and then I'm going to ask if they have any questions, and then I'll let it come back to you. Yeah, we're on time again now, so you went really fast at the beginning, and I went really fast through this. Okay, so do you have any questions about those three terms? Do you feel like you have some clarity? Any confusion still that we can help you with before we move on? Because the whole rest of today is all about phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, and phonics. So, okay, I'll turn it back over to Katie. Mm-hmm.
So we're going to go ahead and start diving into essential practice number 4, which is focusing on the phonological awareness. In this essential, teachers promote phonological awareness development, particularly phonemic awareness development, through explicit explanation, demonstration, play with sounds and words, and engaged study of words. And we're going to show you some different examples and the bullet points of this piece. The one thing that I want to bring to your attention, though, with this is a lot of times after we hit first grade, we kind of say, this doesn't really apply to me anymore. And the truth is, it does. Although you're going to be teaching this more explicitly in K1, and if we are teaching it explicitly and we are ensuring that students are getting it, we shouldn't have to teach it beyond that. But the truth is, we're not at that point yet. There are a lot of our struggling students who still struggle with this piece. And I always bring up my son because he is he's the one I deal with all of these things, but he is dyslexic. He is a 4th grader. This is an area he struggles with. If you have a struggling student in your class who's struggling, you'll see it in spelling, you'll see it in writing, you'll hear it in their reading. They're missing sounds or they're not able to produce sounds. And that means that this is an area that they still don't have down very well. So if you teach upper elementary, this isn't something you necessarily need to bring to the table for your whole group, but please don't dismiss doing these activities at a higher level for your students if they are struggling students in your classroom. And you're going to see that some of the activities that I show you are activities that you're going to primarily do with kindergarten or a 1st grade student because these are meant for whole class, tier 1 type activities. But just think about how you can bring that to the level of what your fourth grader might need or your fifth grader might need if they're struggling in this area as well. So the first bullet is something that I think if you've ever taught preschool or kindergarten or first grade, you get pretty good at doing these, especially if you have read-alouds and other things in your classroom. But the first one really is to listen to and create variations on books and songs with rhyming and alliteration. And this is why in preschool we have all those finger plays and poems and songs that we're doing in the classroom. It's for this purpose here. And just like Diane was talking about that big umbrella of phonological awareness, this brings out the importance of that oral language piece. Sometimes we skip the importance of that, and so therefore we're not as worried that students can understand that there are words in the sentences or that can have conversations with other students. We quickly jump to, oh, but do they know the sounds in that particular word? And they need to know whole language and be able to speak and understand whole language first before they're able to do that. So this brings out a lot of those skills for students and lets them practice those skills. Some of the common ones are like the Down by the Bay, Brown Bear, If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. Those are some of those common books that you'll see that a lot of teachers will use those as opportunities for students to write and do sentence stems with and start to reproduce other books. But also Pamela Duncan Edwards is an author who writes books all on alliteration, and so she has a lot of great books out there. If you're looking for books on alliteration and rhyming, it's pretty easy to Google rhyming books, and you'll get a lot of books you can bring into your classroom to practice that rhyming piece as well. Another important piece is sorting pictures, objects, written words by a sound or sounds. And when we're thinking about looking at the phonemic awareness piece, this is where we would want to just have just pictures and no letters. These are just the sounds. They're making associations with the sounds that they're hearing in words. However, some people will use this and will use letters when they're starting to make that, to bridge the concepts between phonological awareness and phonics. But you want to make sure that they have the phonological awareness piece down first before you start bringing in the letters to have them use. So, for example, this person, the teacher, may have decided that she was going to put the pictures up at the top. That is a closed sort example, so that is really going in with an intention of, I want them to listen for beginning sounds or ending sounds or middle sounds. And so that right there has students starting to look for things in particular and sort them into categories. But another way that you can do it, if you want to just see kind of where your kids are at and use it as a formative assessment, is just to give them the pictures and let them sort. Let them see where they're hearing sounds. Now, you have to kind of keep flexible in your mind that you may be thinking we're going and looking at beginning sounds, and they start sorting by, oh, these have the same end sound. These have the same middle sound. So depending on what your purpose is how you might want to choose a different sort. And let's say that you are just running low on time, you don't have picture cards on you to be able to do these things. A word hunt sort is a good thing for them to use as well. So if you have a picture or a word or something that you're telling them, and they can then look around the room and try to look for things then that start with that same sound or end with that same sound. It's a quick way to do a sort when you don't have physical things in front of you to be able to do a sort. But this really allows kids to be able to look at similarities and differences between things and hear those similarities and hear those differences in words. And you will find a lot of kids, you'll start to see patterns in their writing that show up as to where they're making similar issues. They're having problems hearing the end sounds or hearing those mms or ms in words. So even if you have a student that might be a third or a fourth grader and they're missing out on some of these sounds, you can still pull out picture cards that have some of those words that or sounds that are more difficult. Let them do a sort so you can hear and see if they're able to understand and categorize them and see if that will help them to be able to then make that connection back to their spelling and their writing by adding in the phonics. So you can use this with older kids. You just have to be a little bit more strategic about the pictures and things that you choose to have them sort. Another one is using the Alcona boxes. And we're going to give you an example on here as to one way that you can use the Alcona boxes. And this is just a video that came from the literacyessentials.org. This can give you an idea of what kind of strategies are out there for you to look at as well. But Alcona boxes are used for students to be able to start segmenting the different sounds and words. And it's a strategy for you to not only help students be able to put the sounds, segment the sounds out, but identify where the different sounds are in the words. This is another activity. As you're watching this, you'll be able to see As you want to start to bridge phonemic awareness and phonics, you can start adding in letters with them as well. So I'm going to let you see this example first, and then we'll talk about it a little bit more.
Try and listen for sounds in some words today. The amount of sounds you hear are going to be used. You can use this box to help us with the amount of sound you hear. Okay, so first I'm going to show you. If I have the word fit, I'm going to put the star on the left so I know I need to start here. I go from left to what? Right. So I'm going to start here. That way I know this is my first box when I'm looking at it from me. If I put it this way for you, it would start here. And I'm going to try and figure out how many sounds are in this word here. What is this arrow pointing to? Fin. Oh, I heard fish. But what is the arrow pointing to on the fish? Fin. Okay, so first I'm going to say fin. I'm going to stretch those sounds out so I can see how many I hear. Fin. You try that. Now we're going to take those sounds and we're going to segment them or make them smaller, like this. Let's listen to that beginning sound. Then it goes So I'm going to put some of these counters down, and I'm going to put one down for each sound that I hear. Ready? How many sounds do I have in that word? 3 sounds in that word. I'm going to ask you to try the same thing. Remember, the star goes on the left. Okay, ready? Let's do our sounds. Drag it to the first sound box. Good. The last sound is How many sounds do you have, Zion? How many counters are there? Count them. So there are how many sounds in the word fin? 3 sounds in the word fin. Very good. When they know that there are 3 sounds, then they can concentrate and isolate those specific segmented sounds when they can see it on that physical model. So they know that there are 3 sounds within that word. It may not necessarily be 3 letters, but they'll remember what sounds need to be put into its place because of that physical model. What is this man doing? Sit. Say sit. Okay, now stretch out the sounds you hear in sit. First with your words, let me hear. Okay, now you.
So if you're going to take that piece and you want to use bridges for Alcona Boxes, you can see how she has the 3 squares and they went through and they put up their little markers. You could replace those with magnetic letters as they get better too, and then they can practice putting the magnetic letters up to kind of draw the bridge. Now if you have older kids who are struggling with spelling, sometimes I don't use Alcona Boxes, sometimes I will just have them use lines to mark it. But still going through the process is what they need to do. So if they're trying to learn a new spelling word and they're trying to figure it out, we still want them to practice saying, I'm trying to think of a good word. Let's just say want. Wa-a-nt. We want them still thinking through it and then being able to take those sounds and then decide what letter is going to go here to spell a word. So you can still use a similar type idea with some of the older kids to help them be able to think through and slide through all the sounds in the words. Because a lot of times those kids that are struggling, they just don't slow down enough to hear what sounds are in the words, but they really do know what letters would go there if they just took the time to listen more carefully for them. Next, these are activities you can use that are more for blending sounds. So instead of taking the sound and breaking it up, we're giving them the broken apart word and having them bring it together. So just for example, if we were to give kids the picture sitting down, then we would say to the kids, okay, which word is sled? And they would point to the picture of the sled. Or we would say, what is fish? And they would point to the fish. So this time they're not breaking it apart. This time they're putting it together and showing you the picture. really is the most important part of all of it, is the last bullet point, and that's opportunities to be able to use this in their reading and writing, and for them to be able to apply all of these skills, be able to apply it to spelling when they're using their spelling. Any tools that we're teaching kids are things we want them to use, and we want them to take with them into Readers and Writers Workshop. And in this video, it just gives an example of how she goes through and has the students start thinking through their spelling. I think sometimes we question as educators, what do we tell them? How much do we have them go? Do we want them to do more inventive spelling? I think there's always that question of how far do I take things? And she gives kind of an example of where she decides to stop and focus. And you'll see she has a purpose behind that.
And we're going to show 2 segments of this, so we're just going to pause for a second while we move to the second segment.
Tell me about your paper. Tell me about what you're drawing here. What was your favorite part or your favorite exhibit? The gravity room. Okay. So let's try and label our illustration about the gravity room. Do you want to call this whole thing gravity room, or what would you describe as the gravity?
Okay. The reason why we wanted that first part to be in there, we didn't want to show you the whole video because it's too long, but we wanted to help you remember that this is during what you're doing for conferring for writing. So she's coming in with the idea that we're looking at labeling and we're trying to give a title to what we're doing. So she has a different purpose for her conferring going in. Her idea is not to go in and just correct spelling. Her idea is to go in and to confer with that student and talk about writing. It's just you're going to see when he's trying to label, this is naturally going to come up. Because I think a lot of times we get in the habit with those younger students is that all of a sudden we see all these spelling issues, and so when we sit down and confer, we spend a majority of our time helping them spell everything out when we have to find some point at saying, there's a balance here. This child, we need to get them excited about writing and give ideas about writing. So today, I'm not focusing as much on the spelling piece as to where other days you might say, all right, we need to start hitting some of these follow the phonics rules we're doing. It's a good opportunity for me to dive in with that.
Okay, so Tina, this you called the what? The gravity room or the gravity house. So let's try and label the word gravity above here, okay? So let's write the word gravity. Say the word gravity. Say the word gravity. Okay, say it nice and slow. Each sound you hear. Good. Let's try and write those letters or those letters that represent those sounds. So what was the first sound again? But what's the sound? That's a letter name. What was the sound you heard? You said it. You said good. Say good. What letter belongs to that sound? Okay, right ahead. What's the next one? I heard you say ah. So then you told me a, but you forgot one. What sound is that? Okay. What's the next one? What's the next sound in grab? If you think so, play it. You can keep going into there. I know that it looks like we ran out of space, but we want to keep it the same word, okay? Go ahead, write it over here. You can kind of make it go down a little bit so it doesn't cut into your illustration. What letters? Okay, so let's see what you have here. D. Is that what you wanted? Oh, you said something extra in there. You said grab I? Where? Grab. Right now you have grab D. Where does it go? Let's stretch those out. Grab D. If you wrote it there, what would it be? Gravity. That's not right. So where should we put it? We have, let's stretch it out. We have
Right here.
Oh. So we have grab D.
So the things that you can see that she's doing is she's listening to the child, and any sounds that child is producing, then she's addressing that sound. She's not adding on the Y, and if you kept watching through the video, she also will just say, you pronounce the word gravity, and so she will just repeat it back to him, and so he starts to catch on that he needs to put a T there. But otherwise, she's not going through trying to get him to spell the word correctly. She's just listening to what he's saying and repeating back to her and taking those cues and then working to help him on the cues that he's already helping her by giving the sounds and her making the connection to the letters. Because this can be a really long process to do with kids, and so being able to take all that time, you're not going to be able to focus on the whole thing, but listening to the student help them get where they are and moving on. And some of the classrooms that I've been in, one strategy that they use with this issue as well with spelling is that if there are kids writing things and they're always saying to you, well, is this right? Is this how we do it? You can always just have on your wall, have something on your wall like we haven't got there yet. And you can always just say to the kids, you know what? That sounds like some of the rules that we've done in our class. It actually is a different rule, but we haven't got there yet. And so they just put the word up on they haven't got there yet. And so that's something that they'll come back to again and say, hey, I remember when so-and-so had this word in their writing, and we hadn't been there yet, but now we're starting to learn about this. And look at this word falls into this pattern. And so then the kids are being acknowledged that they're understanding patterns that you're teaching them, but also that it's okay that we just haven't learned how to do this yet, and that we'll address that when we get there. So those are a couple ways of being able to handle that issue, because it always is a tricky piece as to how much do you really tell them and how much do you let them go with it. And so I want you to stop and think a little bit about this phonological awareness piece here, and think about why is it so important that we're teaching this explicitly at K1? Why is this important that as kids leave K1, we're still thinking about these types of activities and we're still using them as needed in our classrooms? And then also, how might you bring something back to your classroom? What is something that you could try or start thinking about or implementing in your classroom? So we're just going to give you a minute to think about it, and then you can go ahead and talk with your table about it.
So now we're going to move on to Essential 5. So Essential 4 really focuses on all of the phonological awareness, phonemic awareness piece, and now we're going to really move into letter-sound relationships and phonics. So again, the alphabetic principle is that understanding that letters represent sounds. So in the word cat, right, we can learn that k is represented by the letter C, a is A, and t is T. When we're talking about phonics, now we're connecting the letter and the sound. So apple starts with the letter A. Apple starts with the sound A. When I put the letter A and the sound A together, now I'm starting to be able to decode a word, and that's phonics. So in the folders that I passed out on your tables, the first sheet is this sheet, Linnea Early's 5 phases of word recognition. And word recognition is only one part of reading, so there's 5 phases. This is not grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, grade 5. The first 3 phases should happen by the end of first grade, and then the last 2 phases continue to develop through all of the grades until students are reading fluently. So the first phase, the pre-alphabetic phase, students are using just visual cues. There's no connecting the letters to the sound. They don't have that understanding, that alphabetic principle understanding yet. So some examples are, you might see this in your own children when you're driving down the road with them and they say, "Look, Mom, subway," right? They're not reading the word subway. They're recognizing that visual symbol of subway. And so all of these would be examples of words that kids could read without having any understanding of the letter-sound relationship. Their names are also often things that they just learn how to form the symbols, but don't have an understanding that each of those individual letters in their names represents a sound in their name. The second phase is the partial alphabetic phase. So in this phase, students are just beginning to connect letters to sounds, sounds to letters, but they don't have full phonemic awareness yet. That phonemic awareness piece is still developing. So an example might be the word look. The student sees it, they make the connection between L and O, but they might read it as light or lemon or lion, right? Because they just are making the association to that beginning sound and that beginning letter. It also could be they're starting to develop the understanding of beginning and ending sounds. So they have the ook, right? And so it might be look, but it might also be like, it might also be lake, any other words that start and end with those same sounds. The third phase is the full alphabetic phase. And in this phase, children now do have full phonemic awareness. And so they're able to really begin decoding whole words by sounding them out. So, when we're coaching kids and we say, sound it out or stretch it out or, run through the word with your finger and your sounds. So there still can be mistakes here, but the mistakes are fewer. They're closer to accurate than in the previous phase. So they might read look as lock, but they might also read it as look. Okay? The fourth phase is called the consolidated alphabetic phase. So now they're starting to learn patterns, right? So those vowel teams and things like that create the long vowel sounds. They also are able to now start chunking words. So again, when we're coaching kids, we often say, look for chunks right? So that is, look for those patterns that you're familiar with. Look for pieces of the word that you can recognize. So you'll see in that example, they might stretch it out as ook, right? They might say ook. So they're looking for those patterns, maybe word families start to come in this phase where they have that understanding that all those words that end in OOK are going to have that same ending sound. And then the fifth phase is called the automatic phase. So now their strategies are highly developed. They have obviously full phonemic awareness. They have a very solid understanding of phonics. They've learned a lot of patterns, word families, ways to decode unfamiliar words. And they use multiple strategies now when they're decoding. So it isn't necessarily just using their phonics knowledge to decode. They might also look at the structure of the words. They look at context clues to help them understand what that word might be. So on the back of the page in your folder, you have what you see on this slide. So there are 7 columns here. Each column is a student. If you look at the bottom of the column, you'll see the student's name. So and I'm going to put the slide back up with the 5 phases too, but it's on the other side of your paper. That way you won't have to keep flipping. Using the 5 phases, see if you can identify where each student is. What phase would you place that student in? Yeah, she's in the full. She doesn't have all of the letters correct, but she is understanding there is a letter for every sound that she hears. Okay, what about Chris? Yeah, he's in the pre-alphabetic phase. And a lot of what Chris is doing is using the letters in his name to try to spell these words. Because those are the letters he's most familiar with writing. What about Marsha? Yeah, definitely pre, right? So she's... Okay, how about Meg? Yeah, she's kind of in between a little bit, right? So we would probably say she's moving into that consolidated phase. Maybe she's not solidly there yet, but she's definitely moving in that direction. Okay? How about Jeff?
Partial.
Yeah, partial. And then how about Kelly? Yeah, and we might even say she's moving into that partial, right? Not solidly there yet, but getting there. Okay, any question about these? All right. I think this is recording.
One of the things that we noticed that looking at all of the columns is that alphabetic knowledge is really important. Being able to identify your letters and the sounds that go with them are really important. So we're going to jump in a little bit into the essentials again. And this talks about that earlier in children's development. So this is, again, we want to really hit the preschool, kindergarten group. Such instruction will focus on letter names, the sounds associated with the letters, and how the letters are shaped and formed. And so when we stop and think about all of the things that they need to know about letters, they obviously need to know the letter name. They need to be able to look at discrimination. So we need to explicitly teach that by showing them letters that look similar, so then that way they have the opportunity then to compare and contrast those different letters. They need to know the upper and lower case form, because in text they're seeing both, so they need to be able to see both at the same time. Also, we need to show them the different letters in different fonts, because this day and age, I just stop and think about, I was in one thing on Teachers Pay Teachers, and we tend to give those to our students a lot, and all of the multiple forms that are forms of font that are out there that are not even on your computer, the students have to know how to read all of that we give them. So we need to stop and think about the fonts we're putting in front of them as well. Also, letter production, they need to be writing it as they're learning it, and then obviously the letter sound. And this means that when we teach them a letter, we teach them all the sounds that go along with that letter instead of just the one sound that we similarly associate. So, for example, with C, we would want to hit the k sound and the s sound, although we tend to go with k at the beginning of teaching them in kindergarten. And we also just need to be careful about how we're introducing this, that we are helping students to clearly define what a letter is and what a sound is. And so when we talk, we say it's the letter M and it's the M sound. We aren't going to tell them that it's the M sound, because we kind of have it backwards if we think about it. Really, in our language, we have tons and tons of sounds, and they are connected with letters. And instead, we teach it in the form of, here are your letters, and now let's teach you all the sounds that go with the letters. So we kind of have it flip-flopped from how we should really teach it, because our language is made up of sounds and not letters. So we have to kind of think carefully about that piece. Another thing that we want to pay close attention to are boards that we're giving kids, and that's even the letter or the name cards that we put on their desks at the beginning of the year. If we truly want them to be able to use those name tags as tools, and we want them to be able to refer to the different pictures that are representing the sounds, we need to be really careful about what we're putting in front of them, because a lot of times the people that are making the cute design think about which animal looks the cutest or what looks the cutest to go with that letter, and not necessarily what's going to be the best association for that sound. And so we get kids confused really fast doing those things. So we want recognizable pictures. Like, for example, when the lady showed the picture of the man sitting, that's so many cards are like that. And a kid looks at it and they're like, is it a man? Is it a chair? Is it an arrow? Like, what part of that do you really want me to know? So we need to make sure they're familiar objects for the kids, and that, like I said, they're good examples of the sounds. We don't want blends and digraphs, because that does alter the sound a little bit, so we can confuse kids that way without intentionally doing so. There are letters that make sounds that are kind of unusual in our language. We'll hear a lot of schwas showing up, that we don't want to throw those in there. And then for our C's, we have to look and make sure that we're representing the sound correctly, because there are several different sounds that go along with the letter C. And this is also the same for alphabet books. So this is a strand of alphabet books that could be put out for students to use. C is for cat, C is for crocodile, C is for Christmas, C is for chicken, C is for city, and C is for clown. If we use alphabet books, that's fantastic, but we have to remember that kids see everything as a model. So what we lay out is what they're starting to associate with those letters. So we have to be very intentional about the things that we're putting in front of them as models. And I want you to just stop and think about this for a minute. There are a lot of times that we don't mean to. It just kind of happens. And sometimes we're not really paying attention because the truth is we're kind of just saying something and this kid's fooling around with this kid, and so you're not really paying attention to how you're saying things. But if we say the letter B makes the B sound, repeat after me, B, B. Or the letter R is the pirate letter R. Or the letter M makes the M sound like in Emily's name. Or the O sound is the long sound. Help me make a nice long O. We say these things because we're trying to engage kids and get kids involved in it. But stop and think about what the kids are going to do now when they are trying to spell things and they're trying to read. Now that whole word is changing in their mind because now they're adding on extra vowels and other things connected with these letters, and that's going to make teaching those consonant and vowels a little bit more difficult for students. So let's take a look at an example that we see. So this is obviously a student that is, we'll say, about kindergarten. And I want you to just think a minute how you might coach the student on her spelling of this word. So you see this and you're conferring, and she wrote the cat was soft. I want you to just stop for a minute and think, what might I say, or what words might I use to help them to make that connection? Talk quickly at your table about what's something you might say to that student. This example is something that's very common, and these examples are what kind of brought up some ideas for this article. In your folder, you have an article called Letter Names Can Cause Confusion and Other Things to Know About Letter-Sound Relationships. This is an article from Megan Block and Nell Duke. And we're not going to read the whole article today, but what I would like you to do is take a minute and you're going to read section 1. And the first section is called Letter Names Can Be Confusing. And I want you to read the information that they share, the research that they share, and also pay attention to the what you can do piece. The nice thing about this article is they share the research, but then they give some strategies for what you can do in your classroom. So I'm going to have you read section 1. As you're reading, think about what your thinking was when you were going to coach that student on CAT, and decide if your thinking has changed or not. And then you can get back to your group and talk about the article in that first section. Over again, and maybe there's no right or wrong answer to it, but there are some things that we can consider, and that is the kind of the how. How do we teach letters? What sequence do we teach letters in? How fast do we go through letters? That's all things that you're going to have to decide with your districts on programming-wise, but there are some things that we can give you as guides. Some things to keep in mind are that when we're introducing letters to your class in kindergarten, we need to make sure that we are introducing vowels and consonants together. If we go through and teach all of our consonants, then we can't teach them how to blend. So we need to make sure that if we're trying to choose a phonics program or we're trying to decide a scope and sequence, we have a mix of our consonants and our vowels that go together to make words that kids can start decoding. The most important piece is we always want them to bring it back to meaning. So if we're just teaching A says A, but we're never showing them where that is in a book or how you put that together, then that means nothing to them. So we need to make sure that we have those pieces together. Another thing that we need to think about is that we need to be showing upper and lowercase letters together. Again, the example is we're not always going to see an uppercase A in the text. We need to know when we see an uppercase and a lowercase a, they're connected with the sound. Obviously, we need the sound in there, but we also need the students to know how to write it. That way they can apply it both in reading and writing workshop right away in kindergarten, and we can get moving on those other skills as well. And so we want to make sure that if you're introducing them vowels and consonants, that we're not doing A for the week, and that's how we're teaching it, but rather we're going through a process to where we have a letter a day, and we're kind of rotating through the letters, and we're hitting on letters again, and we're repracticing and bringing them up to the table as we're learning how to read different words. Going to the letter of the day, by the time we get to the end of the year, we've hit Z, and we haven't really made very many connections with the different letters in our alphabet. So those are some things we want to consider when we're looking at how we're introducing letters and programs that we're choosing to do that. If you don't have a program that you're already using in your district, or if you need something else, I can give you a guide. In your folder is, it's a paper that looks like this that has a square around it, and it says example of objective. And this is the enhanced alphabet knowledge. This is kind of a routine that you can use in your classroom when you're introducing letters. And it's a basic routine that you go through that starts out with introducing the letter name. And so it gives you a script. This is the letter M. This is uppercase M. This is lowercase m. Let's practice naming the letter, pointing to the uppercase, pointing to the lowercase. It's a very quick routine on noting upper and lowercase. And then you go into adding in the sound again. So the letter M represents the sound When I say I put my tongue here, explain where it is in their mouth, let them practice making that sound a little bit. Then you can move on to saying, let's find it in our book, or let's find it in our magnetic letters, or however we're going to bring it back to the text. So now we're showing them that those letters and sounds are in the books that we read, in the writing that we do, and then we're going to bring them into practicing forming the letters. So then that way they can practice using it in your writing. You can send them off into workshop, send them off into reader's workshop or writer's workshop, and have them use the letters that they practiced that day. And so this is a quick routine you can use if you don't have anything else in place in your district, or if you want a quick routine to have in your classroom.
Thank you. Okay, so earlier Katie read you part of the paragraph that is under the heading of Essential 5. We're not even into the bullets yet. This is still part of that paragraph that is introducing Essential 5. The part she read you earlier was what the focus is early on. So now we're going to kind of move forward a little bit. And later, the focus is on more complex letter-sound relationships, including digraphs, 2 letters representing one sound, as in sh, ch, o, e, I, or 2 or 3 letters representing each of their sounds pronounced in immediate succession with a syllable. And those are our blends, right? Bull, stir, as in left. Diphthongs, which are 2 letters that represent a single glided phoneme, like oi and oil, or ow and out. And common spelling patterns, like spelling word families, right? Ache, the ending ache for cake, and rake and bake. And then specific phonograms, like all and uld, ud, and patterns in multisyllabic words. Wow, that is a mouthful, right? So most of these things you are probably well familiar with. Sometimes we're familiar with what the concept is, but not the name for the concept. But I think in this room, most of you probably know those. However, you do have in your folder a cheat sheet that we made up for you on later letter-sound relationships. So you'll see in there some... you'll see the name for it, like digraphs, what is a digraph, and then some examples of digraphs. That is a 2-sided document. And so as we go through these, we move students from easier ones to harder ones, right? Beginning with digraphs and working our way down through multisyllabic patterns in words and the ability to then decode those multisyllable words. And in our work, and I'm sure in your work, what we see a lot in 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders is they have all those pieces, but they're having trouble decoding multisyllable words, right? So what we want to do then is go back and see, are there things missing in all of these different phonics skills, right? Are there pieces that they're missing that are making it difficult for them to then recognize those patterns and reach that, consolidated and then the automatic phase of word recognition. So also in your folder you have a copy of what's on this slide. So there are several words here, and each word has a letter or series of letters underlined. And what we'd like you to do is go through and identify which one of these are those underlined letters. So for example, the first word is blue, and the BL is underlined. What is the BL an example of? A blend. Okay, so you understand how that works? Okay, so you may not get through all of it, but we'll give you a few minutes to see if you can get through as many as you can. You can use your cheat sheet to help you if you need to. Okay, you may not have gotten through all of them, and that's okay if you didn't. Are there any that are really confusing to you? Okay, that's good. One thing that we did want to mention, we are hearing from a lot of districts right now that you're looking for phonics programs, doing some shopping around, doing some research on different phonics programs. And you do want to make sure, if you are right now in the process of trying to identify a phonics program for your building or district, that it is a program that explicitly teaches each of these phonics principles or phonics skills, and not just practicing them, but explicitly teaching the kids what is a digraph. So, and then maybe going through some of that same process, that, kind of that same routine of practicing what it is, finding it in text, writing it in words, and just getting, but you have to explicitly teach what they are before you're doing that practice. Okay?
And the way I always like to look at it is there are a lot of different ways to teach rules. So if you're looking at programs, you can find 6 programs that teach the rules totally different ways. I think the most important piece when you're looking is to say, does this lesson teach what the role is of the vowel and the consonant? If it's not teaching students what the roles are in the words, then it's not helping them to explicitly understand why the word is reading as it is. So they need to know the role of consonants and vowels. Also, a piece that we see missing from some programs that we've looked at is the application piece. They have to be able to take that phonics right away. And yes, it's great. Teach it explicitly. Have them highlight where the consonants are and explain why the consonants are, where the vowels are, why the vowels are making the sounds that they're making. And then they can word build or they can word sort. But in the end, they need to be able to take that and apply it right away to their reading and right away to their writing. Otherwise, we're teaching everything in isolation and kids are not making the connections. And so those are some of the things that we've seen when we've gone through and looked at programs. In one of the districts that I'm working with, we went through all of the bullet points of the phonemic awareness and the phonics number 4 and 5. We listed out all of those, made it as a check sheet, and anybody that was on the committee looking at things had to go through and ensure that all of the essential practices were found in the programs that we were choosing. So then we could start having conversations about where we needed to go next, because there were a lot that didn't have that application piece that we need to have in place. So just keep your eye open for some of those things as you are looking. All right. The next thing that we're jumping in is high frequency words. And I love talking about this because I was probably the queen at doing this all wrong. So I guess sometimes when things hit you, then you're really excited to tell other people because you had that brainstorm. But back in the day when I was trained by my student teacher, we were huge on popcorn words, and we had a whole program in first grade how to do popcorn words, and we passed them out. They practiced them at home. We had prizes, and it was fantastic. Although none of my kids could really apply them. They just read the words. So then when I started learning a little bit more, I figured out the aha behind all of it. And so I gave you guys last time the sheet that had the high frequency words by phonics skill. This is kind of going along with that piece here, that they need to be taught with full analysis of letter-sound relationships within words, even for those that are not spelled as would be expected. And so there's a lot of confusion because some of us call things high-frequency words. Some of us call them sight words. Some of us call them irregular words. And so I want you to think about those and think about what is similar or different in your mind between those concepts. And then I want you to look at this list and tell me which ones that you think are sight words. Who has an idea? What's a sight word? Yes, all of them are sight words. Sight words are the words you know by sight. This child's sight word is different than this sight word vocabulary than this sight word vocabulary. Any words that kids know by sight are their sight words. So really, we should not be calling them sight words because that's not the purpose behind what we're trying to teach. And so high frequency words, I think we're pretty good at knowing that. Those are the words that show up most common. Those are the ones that we kind of bring for students to learn, so then that way they can see them as they're reading some of those decodable books or some of those books as they're in kindergarten and first grade. Sight words are the ones we know them right away, but neither of them should be taught by sight. And the irregular words that are in there are words that we need to teach kids that we don't want to say they're rule breakers or they're not following rules because they do. It's just maybe we haven't taught that rule yet. And so we don't want to tell them that they're just irregular. It's not like the patterns that we've learned so far. Move on from there and then teach them the other word. In this video, I'm not going to show it, and I'm going to tell you why. I loved this video because I taught this level, and so it was kind of like an aha for me, and I made good connections. But then I also had some people at the table who taught upper levels, and it confused them. And so I don't want to show it to everybody. I don't want to make people more confused than what they might be on some things. And so this is something to where if you teach sight words and you are a kindergarten, first, second grade teacher, and you have a huge interest into learning more about this, then I would watch this. If you're not, then it might be something that might confuse you more if you're still uncertain about how to teach sight words. But the main point of it that I love talks about kindergarten. And in kindergarten, and even in preschool nowadays, we're starting to hear people say, we're going to get all of our sight words learned by the time you're at the end of first grade. We're going to do it in preschool and kindergarten and whatever else. And if we learn all of these, then you're going to be good to go and you can read any text we give you in first grade. Well, the problem is the research shows that if you don't have any knowledge of a letter sound, if you don't have any knowledge of the shape or a letter name, then you have no idea what a word is. So therefore, you cannot learn a sight word. In fact, what it is for students is just a bunch of shapes. And so if you think about it, if I hold up a card for you that says was, it's pretty easy for your brain to start to memorize the shape of was and say, oh, that's was. However, if you put that into the text, the cat was fast, all of a sudden that was no longer has that shape anymore. Because now it's got the shape of all those different letters with it. It doesn't look like was anymore. So that's why they're not transferring it, because they're just memorizing the shapes that they see. They don't have any connection with the letters and sounds. So when you're thinking about doing sight words at that really early age, make sure the kids are ready. Make sure they know their letters, make sure they know their sounds, make sure they have some skills in decoding, and then you can start to bring in sight words and start to have them practice them in your reading and writing. If you have students that are struggling, a lot of times we send them in the hallway and say, the parent's going to work on sight words. We're going to get these sight words up because they can't decode. We want them to get as many sight words as they can. That defeats the purpose because, again, we're having them memorize shapes that they can't apply. And in all honesty, they're not going to use them. They're going to lose them. So we might as well work on other skills with them instead. And then also, if you were at the first session, there was a group on the sight word article, and there were some people who didn't get it. And so we just attached it in here that this is Nell Duke's article on learning sight words, and it's basically covering the points that we're making about you need to know that knowledge of letters and sounds, and you need to teach it looking at those, with those phonics skills in mind as you're teaching sight words.
Okay, we made it to the bullets.
Oh.
So there's an amazing amount in Essential 5 before we even get to the bullets, right? The bullets are a little simpler and faster to go through, and I'm actually going to go fast because we're getting short on time. If I go through something too fast and you need some clarification, just let me know, okay? All right, so bullet 1 says that instruction and letter-sound relationships should be verbally precise and involving multiple channels, such as oral and visual or visual and tactile. So when we talk about that, oral would be involving the phonological and phonemic awareness skills and activities, pronouncing letter sounds, sounding words out, blending words together, right? That would be the oral piece. Visual is actually looking at the letters, right? Finding letters in words, in their text, comparing and contrasting words, how are they different, what letters are different. And then the tactile is actually using their hands to do things, right? So practicing letter formation, sorting words, drawing, spelling, writing. It might be forming letters in a tray of rice or sand, things like that, right? Using magnetic letters to move around and form words. Making words where they have the letters in front of them and they're building the words. All of those are visual and tactile, right? So children need to practice in all three of these channels. Not necessarily all at the same time all the time, but you need to have a mixture of kids practicing these skills in all three channels. And now we're on bullet 2 already. So Bullet 2 says instruction and letter sound relationships should be informed by careful observation of children's reading and writing, and as needed assessments that systematically examine knowledge of specific letter sound relationships. So throughout all of our essentials, we keep coming back to assessment, right? And tailoring instruction to what students need. So we need to be able to identify where are their holes, where are their gaps in their understanding of letter sound relationships, so that I can tailor that instruction then to fill in those gaps. Okay? So when it says informed by careful observation and assessment, how do we do that? So there are lots of different ways that we can assess children's knowledge of letter sound relationships. One is obviously listening to them read and seeing, are they consistently missing long vowels when there's an E at the end, right? Okay, so I know I need to teach them silent E and the whole thing with that. So you can identify things that way. Running records and informal reading inventories would help you do some of the same things. Writing samples, how are students forming their words, spelling their words? Standardized assessments, of course, can identify some of those issues for us. Word lists, reading nonsense words can help us see if students are understanding the patterns, and then spelling inventories. Okay, and there are others as well, but that's just a kind of a beginning list. Okay, bullet number 3. Told you I was going to fly through these. So nobody's raising any hands yet, right? We're good so far? Okay, bullet 3 says instruction on letter sound relationships should be taught systematically in relation to students' needs and aligned with the expectations of Michigan's K-3 standards for English language arts. So again, we've talked about this principle before as well. We're going to take what we learn from our assessments of kids and what we know they need. We're going to also look at our standards, right? What are we required to teach them? So we could even switch those around, use the commutative property in math, right? And say, okay, we're going to look at what I need to teach them. I'm going to use my assessments to tell me what are they missing in those standards, and that's going to help me develop my instruction. Okay? Okay, so we have a video clip here for you. We're not going to show you the entire video, I don't think, but this is a really good example of a teacher who's using assessment on letter sound relationships to inform her instruction. So we'll let you watch that.
One of the ways that I figure out how they know about letters and sounds is using spelling inventory, and this is an example of a spelling inventory that I've used. And the students get a list of words, and they just spell those words, and I can assess the letter-to-sound relationship and their letter knowledge, whether it matches the specific sound or they're using different spelling patterns within the words to really give me a good idea of where they're starting with their knowledge of letters and sounds. This spelling inventory might help me understand the letter-to-sound relationship. For example, if I give a student the word bed and they write BD, I understand that they know the consonant sounds at the beginning of the word and the end of the word, but they might be missing that short vowel sound in the middle. So it gives me a good baseline to start with, and it really helps me understand where they're at with their letter-to-sound relationship, so I can see it within their reading and within their writing. And I might make small groups with that and pull them during writing time or pull them during reading time to really give them that strategic small group intervention to meet their needs exactly where they're at within their letter-to-sound relationship understanding. Throughout the year, I look at different examples of their writing, and it really gives me a formative assessment as to where they're at with their writing and their understanding of their letter-sound relationships. The student wrote the word tried, and they wrote T-R-I-D-E instead of T-R-I-E-D. This student used a really great strategy here with the E at the end, where the E is making the I say its name. However, they also can learn that there's multiple patterns there that they could be using, and that the E at the end isn't the only way to make I say its name or the long sound. Another example would be this student with their writing, they wrote G-E-T-I-N-G for getting, and this student really needs to focus on that double consonant in the middle of the word, so that would be an area that I could focus on with this student in a small group setting. So one thing I do to help kids with understanding these patterns.
Okay, so you might want to grab a sticky note, or if you've got some paper that you're writing on, think about how this teacher was using assessment to inform her small group instruction, or maybe even when conferring with kids in writing or reading. How is she using her assessment? So just stop and think about that. Maybe jot down some notes about how you might use this either in your own classroom or with the teachers that you're coaching.
It's just a way to get you thinking. Yeah. To the whole thing. You know what I mean? If I only say that, so listen. I'm okay with that. All the time. Or they take 2 weeks to do like more intensive exercise. So that's all.
And chances are, and chances are, like,
What because I did it for a while. What did they use for the application questions as far as like finding it in their writing?
I just remember having the most fun with that double consonant.
yeah, it's like I teach everyone right
Vowels followed by double consonant. Remember this?
right. Right. Yeah, and like they might know to put that E at the end to make the I say I in that word, and they might not know the IE yet, you know, so if it's not one you've taught yet, you know,
that lower group are not necessarily all in the lower reading groups. They have like full guided reading groups going on. That there would be a correlation between those.
Okay, if you can bring your conversations to a close, please. Okay. So bullet number 4 says that instruction on letter-sound relationships should be accompanied by opportunities to apply knowledge of letter-sound relationships taught by reading books or other connected texts that include those relationships. So that raises the question of what should beginning readers be reading? So if you look at this list of choices here, what do you think beginning readers should be reading? Just take a minute and look at the choices and see what you think. Okay, so what do you think? All of the above, right? We want to give kids exposure to texts such as decodable texts that are going to help them practice those skills we're teaching them. But then we also want them to be able to practice and apply those skills in children's literature, where it's not going to be quite so predictable and easily decoded, but they can begin to use the skills we're teaching them. And then bullet 5 says instruction on letter-sound relationships should be reinforced through coaching children during reading, most notably by cueing children to monitor for meaning and by cueing children to attend to the letters and words and recognize letter-sound relationships they have been taught. So when we think about that, we're going to have less skilled readers and we're going to have more skilled readers. And when we're thinking about how are we going to coach those readers, we need to think about what are the issues that they encounter if they're less skilled or more skilled. So less skilled readers will rely heavily on context and guessing, right? We see a lot of those beginning readers and struggling readers guessing at what the word might be. They read slowly and with great effort, a lot of stopping to decode words, a lot of robot reading because they have to study the word for a second before they can say it or read it. They focus on decoding rather than comprehending. They skip challenging words in sections of text. And they don't monitor their reading to make sure it makes sense, right? And that's why everything in the Essentials says that we always want to bring it back to meaning making, right? So maybe the students are working on decoding those words, but we want to make sure we're not just getting through the decoding in our instruction with them, but also, what did this say? What do you understand from it? What meaning can you make from it? More skilled readers tend to read a new word part by part, right? Again, we talk about chunking those words. Look for chunks you know. They do process words much more automatically and rapidly. They look for known word parts in unfamiliar words. And they use context to confirm and not guess pronunciation and meaning. And so in our more skilled readers, that's often where we see them do a self-correction, right? They read a word that they think it is, but they're using context, and something in their brain says that doesn't make sense, and they go back and they fix it. So in our more skilled readers, we're really looking for, are they able to do these things? And if there are things in here that they're struggling with, that's what we're going to coach them around. Okay?
Okay, and to kind of wrap up our thinking, we've had a lot of things that we've talked about with phonological awareness and phonics. I want you guys to take out the things to look for sheet in your folder. This page was compiled by the researchers, and when they went out into the field, these were some of the common things that they were seeing in classrooms that kind of were disrupting from what are some of the pieces that they have put into the essential practices. So these are some of the things that got in the way from them being able to really fully implement some of the strategies to support the essentials. And so I want you to take a minute as you're kind of reflecting and closing out today, and as you're thinking about your sticky note and your problem of practice, as you're thinking about those things, read through these and kind of think about, are these things that I might want to focus on or think about? Are these things that people on my team might want to be aware of? Just kind of take a few minutes and reflect on some of the look-fors that they found.